Welcome back to the Boiler Room, everybody. This is part 2 of the August the 18th, 2022 Boiler Room. I'm your host. My call sign is Hesher. Thank you for joining us. It's we had some major rain during part 1 of the show. Went outside and checked, and sure enough, my ears are not totally blown, and I was hearing rain, so that makes me feel a little bit better. Okay, so alternatecurrentradio.com, that's the website. We're live on YouTube, we're live on Rockfin, we're live on Spreaker, we're live on ACR. Did I forget anyone? I don't know. Big cheers and thanks to Rooster for supporting us out there, and everyone else that has supported us, any of our patrons or anyone who has dropped anything in the swear jar. We really appreciate that. We really appreciate that. That helps keep the operation afloat over here. And as we roll into the second part of tonight's Boiler Room, it's going to be a dynamic duo of myself and the Wandering Wolf. Corey Drayton, welcome back to the show, man. How are you?
Hey, man. It's good to be back here for part 2. I had a nice stroll around the neighborhood with the dog during the intermission. And you know what I noticed? All the crickets were where they belonged, in the trees.
In the trees, on the ground, in the grass. Even the dogs don't want to eat crickets, man.
That's right. That's right. Live and let live. You know, the crickets are doing their thing. They're performing a vital function for the environment. The dogs know that. Human beings know that. I'm not sure about human beings 2.0 or whatever we're being upgraded to, but yeah.
You know, it strikes me. So if you're just checking out this particular episode here and you haven't watched part 1 yet, you might want to go back and watch part 1 first. But for those of you that are in sequence here, and those of you that are listening and viewing live tonight, we did talk about in Manitoba, Canada. We showed Sean Baker reposting this video of a corporate bug supplying ghoul of some sort, masked up, going into a class of what looked like, I don't know, how do they call it? They say it different in Canada, right? They don't say 6th grade. They say like grade 6 or something like that. In some grade 6 classroom, and giving the kids bags of bugs, enjoy the bugs, kids. What flavor did you get? I don't know, but it tastes like ketchup. Gross. Actually gross. But here's what I'm wondering, and what do you folks think about this? Let us know in the chat. At what point, so the whole thing with eating bugs, right? It's to save the planet and to reduce carbon and to stop us from eating meat, which, by the way, is the healthiest thing that you can do for yourself, is make sure you get enough beef in your body. But that's an aside. But I'm curious. It seems to me that, and maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems in the vegan circles, they don't disapprove of eating bugs. Am I wrong in that assessment, Corey, or am I sort of on target there?
From my understanding and from my limited exposure to the vegans locally, they don't seem to make much of a distinction. So I think you are right on the money with that. That when it comes to eating the bugs, somehow it seems to skate by the moral filter that vegans seem to apply to their lifestyle. To say nothing of the fact that, vegans do still ride bikes and look at some of the components of bicycles, and they don't necessarily pass muster with veganism, but that's a completely different subject altogether.
Got to make sure you get that pleather seat, not that leather seat if you're riding a bike, I guess, right? I'm sure there's a couple other parts on there.
Yep, you feel me.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering at what point. Hey, you know what? Do me a favor while you're hanging out there. Check your settings and double check that you're on the right audio interface. I've got a little bit of a different sound coming from you there, so I want to make sure it didn't go to your internal microphone. But I gotta wonder, at some point, do the vegans start to say, do they why do they not love the bugs? Like, why are bugs so separate from animals, right? Because they'll do anything to stop the rest of us from eating pig, chicken, cow, lamb, fish, all the stuff that has the nutrients that make our brains actually function and our bodies not go into collapse in a long-term sort of diet thing. So how do they separate? Like, what's the moral standard that separates farm animals from bugs? I'm just curious. Maybe one of our vegan listeners can tell me.
It's a very interesting question, isn't it? I mean, and I think if I had to guess, I wouldn't say that it's a moral standard that they're applying. It's an aesthetic standard. Right? It's kind of like that old Dennis Leary bit from back in the 90s. We only want to save the cute animals, don't we? I think it's a bit like that.
Okay, right. Because one of the things they used to always say was like, I don't eat anything that had a mother. So maybe bugs aren't, maybe bugs' mothers don't count. I don't know.
Do ants not have queens? So you couldn't say that
Right?
ants have a queen mother?
Yeah. So, I don't know, just curious, point of interest there. Yeah, so, the bugs. They're making these giant factories. They're making all over the place. They have them in the UK, they have them in Canada, they have them here in the United States now. They have some that say they can crank out 50 tons of crickets in a certain amount of time. And I guess what I'm getting at here is number one, what's the moral deciding point, between farm animals and insects? Why does it exist? What is the calculus there, the moral calculus? And number two, if they do make that leap to, you know, don't eat the bugs because it's not vegan, what do we do then? I guess we're all just eating kale. But what's messed up is they can't plant soy and kale and all the other things that they use to make that factory soy slop that a lot of vegans eat, Beyond Burgers and such, without destroying land that has tons and tons and tons of bugs and animals on them. So when you really look into like what goes into making a soy farm happen, soybean farm happen, or any farm for that matter, um, yeah, all kinds. There is a mass bugicide, a mass insecticide, if you will.
Yeah, the quest for absolute moral purity tends to lead one directly to oblivion because what people don't seem to recall or understand, I maybe since the education system has gone the way it's gone, maybe they're not even discussing this anymore. But there is a thing on this planet called an ecosystem, and that ecosystem does rely on species consuming other species in order to sustain themselves. And in the process of that sustaining of self, that consumption, that allostatic load that is necessary for maintaining homeostasis, so the proper functioning of the body, the metabolic functions that make sure that the brains and the heart and the kidneys and the muscles and all those things are operating properly, all of that relies on entropy, entropy through consumption. And we all play a very important role in balancing that ecosystem. So if you have an abundance of anything in that system, it throws the entire system out of whack. And then a massive correction has to take place in order to bring that system back into balance. So all of this moral grandstanding leads to oblivion because you can't be morally pure without really consuming nothing and thereby allowing your body to consume itself and then get to a point where it ceases to function. We call that death. And you also can't engage in this moral grandstanding without throwing off the natural balance of things and creating an overcorrection in another area that destroys an entire species or destroys something that a species needs in order to survive.
Right. So if they outlaw uh cattle, for example, and like, I get it. I understand people like get really into that, like, oh, I love the animals so much. I hate people. I love the animals and I want to help them. We have these people that go out and they'll actually disrupt farms, they'll do all kind of stuff to farmers to screw them up. And then you have these other people, and I'm not trying to bag on them really, but they'll go out and they'll like change their entire life. They'll go buy a small farm and then they'll go around and they'll just collect all the farm animals that they can. If like someone has a sick lamb, or someone selling a cow, they'll buy a cow and keep it as a pet. You know what I mean? Like basically, they call it like a rescue, like a vegan farm rescue sort of thing. And then sometimes they charge other vegans to come over there and do like the petting zoo thing, which, all right, that's the way you want to live your life. That's cool. I guess you got a purpose, you got a thing. But let's just say they outlaw the eating of meat or the farming of cattle, which obviously they're never going to do. They may do that for the plebs, but the oligarchs, the elite, the high class, the Hollywood people, they will always have all the beef that they need, all the chicken that they need, all the organic farm and ranch materials that they need. All right. If they're going to take it away from people, it's going to be normal middle class people, if there is a middle class anymore, or whatever the new normal stratus is. But what happens to all the cows if we can't eat them anymore? Guess what? They're all going to get slaughtered. There is no reason for them to exist on a farm. And those types of people, those types of vegans that I just described, there are not enough of those kind-hearted people to house the millions and millions and millions of bovine that we have on planet Earth. So it's essentially, they say we can't eat them. Well, of course, you got the people that say you can't eat them because they fart and they make the climate change, which is laughable. Um, but then you have the ones that are more moral about it, and they just don't want to see the cattle get killed, right? You're eating suffering, you're eating pain, that kind of stuff. Well, when nobody eats them anymore, what are they for? What are they doing? Who owns the land that they're walking on? There are millions of them on this planet. Guess what? They're going to be a mass cow genocide because there just won't be any people eating them anymore.
Right. So imagine that this plays out. You have this mass genocide of cattle, because it's considered to be the humane thing to do. And then, of course, as you said, the elites are slaughtering as many as they can so that they can stock up on steaks. But then, what about sects of people in the world who regard the cow as a sacred animal? So, how are the Hindus going to feel about this mass cattle genocide? you know so when it comes to something like veganism, I can't help but see it as a secular religion that operates on the basis of a consensus that is shifting and changing quite frequently so that it can maintain the fiction that sustains it you know
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Hindus, they may not eat the cows, but they certainly don't want to see the rest of the world stop eating them so that we have to annihilate all of them from the planet, right? Because nobody's gonna keep these grazing lands, the cost of these grazing lands. And plus, the other thing that they do is they actually are part of that ecosystem that we're talking about. Like, they eat the grass, they crap on the grass, they refertilize it. There's a whole like cycle of you know, life that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, the bacteria that live in the guts of many organisms, that there's a specific combination of gut flora that's necessary to have a specific effect in the environment. So if you lose that organism and you lose that gut flora, the potential impact in the environment is catastrophic. It's actually destructive to the environment to follow a really quasi religious zealotry that says we cannot keep animals this way. We cannot utilize them in a cycle of production and consumption, because to play into that methodology, that mindset, that system of false virtue is destroying the very environment that we claim to be stewards of and are trying to protect.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
that a lot of them, they just don't know this, because most of the vegans that I've encountered, where do they live? They live in fucking cities, right? They've never been on a farm. They have no idea what it's like. They don't know the smell of a farm animal. They don't know what it's like to be around manure. They don't know what it's like to be around any of this. They live usually in very nice overpriced condos in places like New York, San Francisco, or Portland, or Seattle, LA to a certain extent. And they are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 degrees of separation from the sources of everything they consume. Yet they claim moral superiority over how these things should be done, how these things should be handled, and whether or not they should be consumed, without any exposure or any experience. Why are we listening to people like that? It's like listening to people who've never been to an airport tell us how we should be handling air traffic control. It makes no sense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Um, yeah, it's pretty amazing, and it's such a I don't know how we got off on this part of the tangent, or how I'm about to get off on this part of the tangent, but it's such a junk food diet. Like, you look at the soy-based stuff that, all the processed stuff, right? Like, there's all this stuff in the grocery stores now, and usually when I walk past it, it's all just sitting there. It's never been picked through, and it's aging, and some of it looks like it's been sitting there a long time. It bothers me when they stick it in next to the meat. They stick Beyond Burger right next to a hamburger, like they're trying to trick people into thinking that they're the same thing. Um, and it's largely a diet of junk food. Like, a lot of the and I'm not I am not trying to slam anybody here, I've actually worked with Tristan Haggard at Primal Edge. Spore and I took one of his coaching classes, and we were in a group of people who were former vegans. You know what I mean? They were recovering vegans, and there were people in there that had suffered really really badly. You know what I mean? Like, there was a woman who was in her early 30s, and her hair was all falling out and turning gray. She had gotten extremely overweight, like extremely overweight. Her blood uh toxicology was all messed up. Right, good one in the comments there. Always hungry, because they're never having that satiation, right? They never reach that. And then, you find these people that say, "Oh, I'm vegan," and all they eat is potato products, French fries, potato chips, vegan donuts, all this stuff that is just basically empty calories. And I think it's really it's sad, because if you're doing standard American diet and then you make any sort of change whatsoever, you're gonna go through a period of like, you're basically having an elimination diet. You stopped eating all of the McDonald's and all the, just anything, the food pyramid, if you will. So there's a moment there where you feel yourself start to get better. And I've heard this from vegans who have been through the whole process and then said, "Oh, I'm dying. I'm gonna stop this, and I need help to figure out how to recover my health." Um, but there is that moment there in the beginning where they like, especially if they go plant-based, right? Because, there's the vegans I'm talking about where it's like they're eating Pringles and, all kind of, funky stuff all the time, and they're just trying to find things like loaded with sugars and stuff like that, because they can still eat all the sugars, they can still eat all the carbs. It's like, oh, it's from plants, it's fine. But so you eliminate all that McDonald's and all that other stuff you were doing before. You become a vegan. You start to lose weight. You go, "Oh, this is cool. I'm starting to feel better." Well, the same thing would happen if you just stopped eating for a week or for a month. just eat nothing, just fast, have a water fast or something like that. You'll notice the effect is the same. But if you stay on that vegan train, you read all their books, you watch all their documentaries, you accept all the Green New Deal programming that goes along with it, and the strange moral virtue signaling codes that you have to imprint on yourself, and all of a sudden you start to get depressed. Depression was the number one thing that I noticed amongst the people in the Primal Edge group that we were part of, and almost every single one of them was talking about depression, brain fog, and all these other things. So um, it's just amazing to me, man. And a lot of this stuff comes from factories. It comes from GMO soy. GMO soy, which has endocrine disruptors in it, will mess with your hormones. It's just what did Tristan call it? He called it a oh, I'm trying to remember, like a not a starvation diet, but malnourishment diet or something like that. He had a great term for it. Is escaping me right now, but yeah, yeah, it can be really bad. So when they do these bug farms, similar thing, they clear cut all this area, they build all this industrial stuff up. They have these like boiling vats and all this stuff. I mean, uh, they probably make GMO crickets at this point. I don't even know if we're getting natural crickets if you are dumb enough to go eat the crickets.
Yeah, it's interesting with all of this stuff to just kind of watching it happen. I mean, I see so much of it happening around me because of where I live. And I have friends who've gone down that path, and I'm not the kind of person to ever tell people what to do. I will be a mirror for people, but I don't give advice, because to give advice is to put yourself in a position above someone else. And I think, hey, no, we're all peers, at least as long as the conversation is happening between adults. But when I think about the vegans I know, they are deeply unhappy. Their immune systems do not seem to function properly. They're sick all the time for long periods of time. And it's just, it looks like they are struggling so much just to do the basics that maybe I take for granted. I mean, I fast 16 hours a day. But I eat a very clean diet apart from that, and I do eat a very balanced diet. So I'm consuming meat, I'm consuming fish sparingly, because again, the methyl mercury and everything, you've got to be careful with that. But I know what my body is telling me that it needs. I understand nutrition, and I know that if I'm not nourishing myself with real food and listening to what my body is telling me, I'm going to start having off days. And nobody taught me about nutrition. I had to learn that on my own. And even in the years before I got colorectal cancer, I was working really hard to have a balanced diet, which is incredibly difficult in a society like this one, because you are surrounded by food that is anything but, not just the additives, but the sugar and the soy in particular. So it's really not, I think that it's not hard to gain an understanding of what nutrition actually is. There are a myriad of resources out there now. And I think that people, they don't really, in my mind, have any excuse now to not know about nutrition. It's just that people are so inculcated into the moral components of eating and how we regard our relationship to food, that if they have no other locus of meaning in life, this becomes the thing that they can gravitate towards, because, hey, look, I'm eating the way a virtuous person is supposed to eat. I'm eating the way a good human being, the human being of the future, the new Soviet man, whatever you want to call him, is supposed to eat. And we have to decouple eating from the moral and the ethical enough to have a boundary around what the human body needs to consume in order to function. There's a baseline level of nutrition that we need to sustain life. And why is it not a moral virtue or a sacred duty to engage in that which sustains life? How did we get to a place where we're so far removed from that thinking. I think it's because most of us, at least in the West, live so far from the land. And when you have a close relationship to the land, you understand what you're consuming, usually because if you weren't the one who produced it, you know the person who did. And I think your relationship with animals changes as well, because you're going to develop a bond and a symbiosis emotionally with the animals that you are relying on in order to survive. So it is in your best interest to make sure that you are treating them with the respect that they deserve as living beings. So it's that symbiosis of how we regard each other and other life forms that I think we've also lost as well, as food has become decoupled from our very survival.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't understand why they don't realize, or why more people don't realize that it's a lot like, it's a lot like the gay agenda in the sense that it's corporate. You should notice it's a red flag when it becomes corporate. Like, what happened to the whole mindset of, hey, let's be a little bit wary of things, social things that are backed by corporations. And this is like across the board. Don't even get me started about how much money Bill Gates and the likes have put into it. The same corporate entities that are blaming you for climate change and blaming you for social inequity are telling you that you should eat the bugs and be a vegan and stop eating meat, all this stuff. So it's like you've got that corporate factor. And then the other thing I've noticed anecdotally, just by being around a lot of these people, I've known a lot of vegans over my life. I don't give them a hard time. I speak my mind when I'm on air, and people may think I'm giving them a hard time, but hey, you want to do that, fill your boots. I'm just saying you can't fill your boots with that and not recognize, number one, that a lot of people walk away from it feeling very bad. They walk away from it in a very, very bad state. And number two, it's corporate backed, like I said. Number three, Bill Gates, all these other entities, they're buying up all this farmland to make more fake food, to destroy more animals on said farmland so they can set up these giant garbage places where, they make kibble food out of soy products, out of GMO soy products. And the other thing, you're much more susceptible to big pharma. If you're doing that diet and you're not super careful, there's an argument to be made for, I got to do it this way. It works for me. It's worked for me for years. You will find those people out there. Although I think they might be sneaking some KFC and not telling anybody, but hey, that's just my sneaky suspicion there, Corey. But the other thing is the depression that comes along with it, and the physical symptoms, the degradation of joint health, muscle health, that kind of stuff, that leads people to the doctor, which leads them to taking pharmaceuticals. And then you end up in this like spiraling sort of situation where your body's not nourished and you're having to dump chemicals on it to allegedly counteract the side effects that you're having from not nourishing yourself.
Yeah, I think it was a few shows ago we were kind of talking about this in the context of street drugs versus pharmaceutical drugs, and the idea of a discomfort industrial complex that functions on a matrix of dependencies is exactly what we're looking at here. Because what you have to do is you have to create a situation where people are malnourished, they're depressed, and they get into this cycle of high allostatic load, which injures their nervous system, which causes further depression, further anxiety, all of the big symptoms of operator syndrome and post-traumatic stress that we've talked about before. And hey, Corporation X has a solution for that. They have a drug for this discomfort and a drug for that discomfort. And those drugs have side effects, which cause further discomforts that you need more drugs, in order to counteract. I mean, it's really, it's this massive matrix of discomfort that makes certain people rich. We talk about this all the time. And it's very difficult to get people to see this. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they just don't have the willpower to see it, because they know that once they see it, they actually have to actively make massive changes to their lifestyles. And that's hard to do. It's hard to get someone who doesn't want to go to the gym and lift weights every morning to go to the gym. If they've never done it before, they know it's going to be painful. They know it's going to be exhausting. They know that it's going to be a massive commitment, and it's hard for them to see any point in the near future where it's going to be comfortable for them in any way, shape, or form, and not drudgery. So it's much easier for them to just stay in discomfort land and continue to hop on board the bandwagon of whatever the solution du jour is that is offering them some relief from their discomfort in the moment. It's the path of least resistance, I think.
Right, right. And there's this whole community aspect to it too, especially when you're the type that's on social media doing the social media thing. I'm biting my tongue to not say virtue signaling, but that's usually what it is. But you end up with this community of people around you online, and it's like a feedback loop essentially that kind of goes through there. This moralistic feedback loop that happens. And if you leave it, this is another thing that Spore and I learned when we did the Primal Edge coaching group and recovery group. When once you do say, I can't do this anymore, I'm dying, my hair's falling out, my joints hurt, I'm on antidepressants, antipsychotics, all these things. Once you say enough is enough, I'm gonna go work myself back into a more traditional diet. They all attack you. They don't just unfriend you. You know what I mean? They attack you. They tell you you did it wrong. It's your fault, which is the same tactic that the globalist entities, the corporate entities, the cultural engineering entities do to you. It's your fault. The climate is changing. It's your fault. Grandma died from a respiratory disease. Everything is your fault. So you get in that Hegelian sort of loop right there. But your vegan community friends, they will use those same tactics against you to tell you it's all your fault. You didn't do it right. It's your fault. And we don't like you anymore. We're going to smear you on social media and stuff like that. This conversation is probably going to get you and me smeared on social media.
I'm already smeared in social media, and I'm loving it.
You
No,
should.
I mean it's you become, with the council culture and everything. I mean, you become Kafka's Ungezeifer. You're right. You become the verminous outsider, and it's this ultimate confession, I think, of the cult mindset that underlies all of these things. There's an identity addiction that seems to be inculcating itself at all strata of society, and certainly within these moralistic movements of the future, like veganism. It is a cult. It's absolutely a cult, and there's an identity addiction component to it. And if you join that cult, you are renouncing the original sin that is being a human being, a natural human being that evolved in certain conditions and that needs to consume certain things in the environment as a natural part of the environment to sustain itself, so that it can secrete certain other things that support the cycle of life. It's inversion. I won't necessarily go so far to say that it's all the way satanic, but I do sometimes wonder, because of that inversion aspect of it, and bringing in this idea of being a natural human being is sinful. You must not engage in the retrograde behaviors of our evolutionary past. I mean, that is definitely a cult mindset. And certainly excommunicating people is cult behavior. And I think part of what also goes along with the identity addiction is the addiction to discomfort, because I think what we're seeing now, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of language around becoming a more trauma-informed society. Now, okay, sure, on the basis of what that means, having an understanding of other people's trauma, yes, that's important. But what we're not talking about is that you cannot stay in that mindset. You have to recognize your experience and sure, recognize the experience of other human beings, and everyone has to be personally responsible for doing their own inner work, whether it's healing their own trauma or maintaining their own body. So if we have this collectivization that is attached to this moral component around how we live, how we eat, where we live, and how we engage in the world, then we're externalizing a locus of control and we're collectivizing solutions, because then it's no longer within the purview of the individual to decide for themselves how they're going to nourish and sustain their body and nourish and sustain life. It is up to what collective decides is the done thing. So it's the cult mindset made universal, I think.
And I think also, and tell me what you think about this, but I think there's also a transhumanist factor here because what they're doing is they're taking a new morality, if you will, a morality just kind of snatched out of the ether and saying and just disregarding, millions of years of human dietary practices that have gotten us to where we are right now. Yeah, sure, people are eating berries and people are eating, plants and stuff like that. But guess what? Before the Industrial Revolution, you could only do that during the time when those things were naturally ripe or when they were farmed and they were being harvested. There was no factory farming or anything like that. There was no, you know, box of genetically modified this or that, 100 years ago. So this is like a completely new thing, and it's very much based around technology. And when it comes to transhumanism, it's we're talking about transitioning away from the human self, the human body, replacing all the things of that have gotten us to where we are with the science or the progress or the technology or the new morality or the new moral relativism. That moral relativism is what allows transhumanism to exist. It takes everything that once was and changes it into something new, not human. That's what Neuralink is. That's what so many things are. That's where they're taking us right now. That's what jibby jabs do. That's what jibby jabs do. That's another transhumanist idea. And how's that working out so far?
Yeah, there was a manifesto, a small, it was like a 50, 60 page booklet that came out in 1981, written by Donna Haraway. It's called the Cyborgs Manifesto. And basically, that is considered to be one of the earlier arguments for this transhumanism that we're seeing that's erupting through all sectors of society. The interesting thing that she says in there is that the cyborg isn't just the chimera merging of man and machine. The cyborg is also collectives of individual organisms, right? So if you have a group of people who've all been inculcated into a transhumanist mindset where they've been told, hey, being a human being, being a natural human being is sinful. And in order for us to sustain the environment or to be morally pure, you must adopt this new way of living. You get 50 people to adapt that mindset. That collective of 50 people itself is the cyborg, because that behavior can be collectively managed and collectively directed towards specific ends. So the cyborg isn't just, Arnie as the T800. It's the collective of these new transhumanist individuals who are being directed towards specific purposes to achieve this utopian vision. And as we said on the show last week, what does utopia mean? It means nowhere. It's not something that's actually achievable. It cannot happen. It is a theoretical construct.
Right. Right. And that's why transhumanism doesn't work. That's why Battlestar Galactica is written the way that it is. These things, they just don't function. It's not there because it like you were talking about entropy earlier. It's like it removes the entropy in the mind, but it's still happening. It's still happening. Yeah, it's very interesting to see it as from that perspective, and that's interesting also to think about the idea of a cyborg being something that can actually be a groupthink, a collective, rather because we have a more science fiction vision of it in our heads because we grew up, reading RoboCop comics and seeing
Hmm.
the movie and Terminator, like you mentioned, and stuff. We've got
Yeah.
so many cyborg visions in our head, and they all seem so science fiction, yet they can sneak it in our diet, here in the 21st century.
Yeah, yeah, that they can. That they absolutely can. Yeah, and it's of course there's always the elements of where this shows up in the art and where this shows up in fiction. I mean, the opening shot of Blade Runner 2049 is these vast fields of farms that are being used to grow God knows what. We're never told what it is in the film, but it's some kind of hybrid soy slop, I would imagine, based on the gray, gooey consistency of it. And they're using replicants of human beings to farm that material, whatever it is, you know. And if you know anything, if you've ever read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which was Philip K. Dick's book that the Bunner film, the first one, was based on. You're coming into a Los Angeles that survived a nuclear exchange, and all of the natural animal and plant life on planet Earth died because of the radioactive fallout. So, an entire religion around empathy called Mercerism arises, and people use these machines called empathy boxes to dial in certain emotional states because everybody's been so traumatized and everyone's in this state of high allostatic load, and they have this nervous system injury, so they can't really emote naturally. They need a technological device that talks to a chip that everyone has inside their mind in order to feel anything. And the rich, they go out and they buy these cyborg facsimiles of animals that used to exist on planet Earth. And it becomes kind of like a mark of someone's moral purity to own a replicant animal. You have to work hard for one of these massive corporations like the Tyrell Corporation or Weyland the Yutani, because again, Alien and Blade Runner are in the same universe, right? So you work hard to make enough credits, make enough digital currency, crypto, to get one of these replicant animals because it is your way of taking back the part of the original sin of human beings that destroyed animal life on the planet in the first place. So it becomes a totem of your redemption, right? So
Hmm.
all of this kind of stuff, showing up in fiction, we're seeing this mindset right here in the here and now in 2022. Certainly it doesn't play out in a fashion that's nearly as dramatic as we see it in fiction, but the underlying elements are all present.
Right. And you just got to extrapolate forward a little bit, and you can it's not hard to see the massive leaps in how quickly this develops. Like, the old Ron Burgundy meme, well, that escalated quickly. Like, look at what happened in the last 2 years. Look at the escalation there. And the jibby jabs, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That is transhumanism, messing with people's DNA and RNA. That is nothing more than a transhumanist agenda. Um, at best, because it might be a eugenicist agenda or both or something in between, because we know that the contents of the little vials, the little frozen vials, is never the same. It's not the same from lot to lot. You can look that up. It's everywhere right now. There's they're seeing that these lots are very different. Some of them are inert, some of them are not, some of them are just saline. This has all happened. This has all been reported in mainstream.
You mentioned Battlestar Galactica earlier, and I can't help but think all of this has happened before, and all of it will happen again.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
what the Cylons keep saying. Yeah, and there was another point that I was going to make also too, just kind of about the moral component and the moral aspect of all of this. This is something nature abhors a vacuum. I think we've all heard that. This is something that really could only have been facilitated by becoming overly secular, by having a secular society that loses its sense of meaning. Because what happens is you become fixated on the material, and not just materialism in the sense of consumerism, but the material in the sense of I can only believe what my empirical senses are telling me about the world. And while that is mostly true, that empirical reality is the bedrock from which we should operate in the world, we also have to have a deeper sense of meaning and a deeper connection to the environment. And we completely lost that because we're walking around ungrounded, because we're not walking in the grass, we're not in the woods, we're living in these concrete monstrosities of cities because we have to for economic reasons. What is our purpose? Right? It's not to buy things. It's not to hoard piles of shit to sleep on like fucking dragons. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be engaging with nature. We're supposed to be having children. We're supposed to be having relationships. We're supposed to have physical contact with other human beings. You can't. I don't know how any technocrat can think that we can simulate the basic desire for contact, let alone our nutritional needs. This whole idea that we can supersede millions of years of evolution with a device or with some algorithms is the mark of absolute hubris. And kind of like we were saying last week, those old paintings from the 16th century, the two paintings of exactly the same subject, the two farmers looking at the skull laying atop of the tombstone on which is inscribed "Et in Arcadia ego," which means even here in paradise, I, meaning death, holds sway. Every single system that exists tends towards entropy. And entropy is really nothing more than a return to chaos. So, who are we to think that we can master chaos with technological devices? I don't think it could be done. That's massive hubris.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And as soon as something goes wrong with it, like you can simulate it, you know, again, back to Battlestar Galactica, the second one, not the original one. They have this a similar setup, and the networking, like we're all networked right now. Like networking is a thing here, right? We all have the Black Mirror device in our pocket, nuking us and frying us with EMFs. We all are, we have the magic of what we're doing right here. I'm in Texas, you're near Portland. We can do these things, but that opens up a whole new set of vulnerabilities, right? That opens a whole new set of vulnerabilities. And if something happens and all of a sudden we have this system that we all rely on, that our society and our ability to do anything relies upon, and it's gone all of a sudden, or even worse, it's been utilized in a way. There's Ruckus, awesome. Look at that. Or the systems have been utilized in a way that exploit a vulnerability, like it did in that series. So, we get into Neuralink, we get into everybody having Neuralink, everybody having a brain chip, whatever, and that's all going swimmingly for a while. What happens when it doesn't? What happens when it stops working? Like we're very innovative as a species. We can build up all these things and make ourselves rely upon them, but it's still a simulacrum in the sense that once it's gone, we're not of the planet anymore. We're not You know what I mean? We don't know how to. I mean, I lost GPS signal when we were driving around in Oklahoma, and there was a moment there where I was like, "What do I do? Oh my god! Oh my god!" And then I was like, "Wait a minute! I am a human. I used to drive around San Francisco with a piece of paper in my glove box and figure out where I was going. I can do this. Damn it, Siri. I can do this myself. Let's see. Are the addresses ascending or descending? Is it even or odd? Is it on my right or on my left? Boom, found where I was going. I don't know that a Zoomer will be able to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I still drive around with road atlases for various countries in my car because you never know. And to take your analogy, well, to build upon it, your Battlestar analogy. Okay, so when the Cylons attacked, there were only two Battlestars that survived: the Pegasus and the Galactica. The Pegasus survived because their whole system was down for maintenance at the time, so the Cylons couldn't hack into their defense systems and disarm the ship, and they were able to do a blind jump to get away. The Galactica, well, they were the old ship in the fleet. It was spit and baling wire. They didn't really have all of the high end networking systems. It was like taking an old World War II battleship and sending it into modern combat. So to bring that analogy home, you do need a certain percentage of the population that is natural. You need a certain percentage of the population that hasn't jumped on to the technocratic bandwagon, because you never know what might happen that will take that system down, and you need to go back to human being 1.0 and get some genetic material from human being 1.0 to solve a problem going on with human being 2.0. You never know, right? I think even in Brave New World, there was a population of naturals who were sequestered and kept around living in a natural fashion for that very reason. So I think there's a responsibility that some of us may feel to maintain the natural human state, or at least live as closely to it as we possibly can, just for the sake of preserving the human species.
Organic people. Organic people. We got a lot of genetically modified people walking around now all of a sudden. I mean, arguably, we all had a little bit of that in us because it's pretty much impossible to avoid GMO food to some extent. It is doable, but it's very difficult, especially if you're not in charge of every single thing, every ingredient that goes into your face hole. But yeah, Ruckus, welcome back, man. How's it going? How was the Joseph Arthur show tonight?
It was a blast, man. We got to hang out and interview John O'Connor. He's the author of a book called Postgate. It's a long title, but it's about how the Washington Post betrayed Deep Throat and covered up the Watergate scandal and began today's partisan advocacy journalism. So it was a fascinating conversation, a fascinating gentleman. I'm going to order his book, but that's what I had going on over there. And I caught the tail end of what you guys were talking about there. Do you know another main reason why you would always, back in the day, carry around maps and know where you were going or how to get from point A to point B before technology told us how to do that? There was a pretty big reason. It was our pride. Because, yeah, ask any comedian back in the day, do guys get out of the car and stop and ask for directions? No, we don't. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. We knew how to go from one place to the other. And yeah, it wasn't because of the technological lack thereof or whatever. But so, yeah. So what did I bust into? I guess I'll have to catch up.
Well, we started off talking about we kind of picked up where we left off after the intermission. We were talking about that whole scene with the kids being, brainwashed into eating crickets in their classroom. And then we started talking about veganism, sort of generally speaking, and it took us to transhumanism, and transhumanism took us to wherever the heck we are right now, man, to the point where there's a ruckus among us all of a sudden.
So you're saying it was a boiler room? Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. We was boiling it in here. We were just coming in here freestyling, man. I had all
Hey,
these.
did you guys happen to see or touch upon that did you see that vegan burger that's supposed to taste like human flesh?
Now, Spore told me a little bit about this one, and my immediate response was, "Didn't we just talk about that recently?" But
I
she
thought
said
so.
this had to do with Burger King, and the one that we talked about more recently was something somewhere else. I forget the origin, but it was a different story. So here it is again, right?
Mhm. And I think I also saw something about Coca-Cola has a new, like, Coke that tastes like dreams or something like that. So, what are they doing? Like, they're like, "Hey, eat some bugs that taste like meat, eat some fake meat that tastes like human flesh, and drink some Coke that tastes like dreams."
Wow.
Where the hell are we, folks?
Wow. We are headed somewhere very transhuman there. I don't know about the taste of dreams. Like, I guess dreams are, pretty personal. If I had to think if any of mine had a flavor, there've been a number of them I would not want to taste. I've had some crazy ones. Spore says that was in Sweden. The original one we were talking about where they were making human flavored fake meat or whatever was out of Sweden. Yep, that's right. I think that was an icebreaker. Oh man, where
We
are
all
we
we
headed?
all know we all know that human flesh tastes like spam, so, you don't have to go through all of this crazy stuff. Just eat some
Right?
spam.
Buy some spam. It's good survival food too. You can stock up on it. It lasts for a really long time. The ingredients aren't terrible. They're not great, but they aren't as terrible as some of the things you could get. Last I looked, I haven't eaten it in a long time. All right, let's see here. Well, trying to decide if I want to cap this out with let's do it. Let's do it. Since we started this talking about veganism, and I am not one, and neither is Corey, and neither is Ruckus. Let's hear from one. Let's let one speak for themselves. So let's try this out, see if this clip will function for me.
Hi, I'm Shannon, and I'm a recovering vegan. 84% of vegetarians and vegans return to eating meat. Today, I'm going to explain the typical life cycle of a vegan. Firstly, you'll come across some vegan propaganda where you'll be convinced to try vegetarianism, but then you learn about the dairy industry and chicken periods, so you give up those two for the animals, your health, and for the planet. Initially, you feel great. This new diet is certainly better than the standard American diet. You don't understand why the whole world isn't vegan until one day you realize you don't quite feel yourself anymore. You start feeling tired all the time. You're frequently hungry, bloated, or bruising easily. Your hair is thinning, but you never connect the dots that veganism is doing this. After all, you can get everything you need from a vegan diet, right? Then comes the anxiety, depression, PMS, irregular cycles, dark circles, acne. Maybe your gums will bleed every so often. You go to your doctor, but your blood tests turn out fine. Your supplement list grows, but your symptoms remain. But one day the illusion is shattered. You become aware that a restricted diet filled with seed oils, superfoods, hard to digest vegetables, and ingredients shipped from halfway across the world isn't actually sustainable, cruelty-free, or healthy. By that point, you realize that veganism is a scam. Hi,
All right, all right. I'll stop that right there. It started to loop. You know how these reels go. I just never get the full thing or whatever. But so there you go. There you have it. Right out of the I don't want to say horse's mouth. I'm gonna say the celery's mouth.
She referred to herself as a recovering vegan. I find
Hmm.
that term interesting.
Yep. And while you were away on the other podcast there, Ruckus, I was talking about Spore and I's experience in the Primal Edge Health group that we took, like the coaching group we took. And she rattled through a whole bunch of symptoms there and effects. Every single one of those things was being talked about by everybody in that group, or at least everybody in the group collectively had covered all of those things, and many of them had multiple of those issues, if not all of them. They're very standard after a certain amount of time doing this.
I would love to look at that list of symptoms and compare it to the list of symptoms supposedly for long COVID.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding, man, no kidding. All right, let's see here.
Yeah.
What do you think, man? Anything else on that before we move on? We'll move on in a moment here.
I think Ruckus is actually really onto something because it's entirely possible that they could be trying to create a mass discomfort onto which you can tack almost anything. It's just a general discomfort because after all, we have the same physiology, we have the same nervous system. So create a mass discomfort and then attach X, Y, and Z onto said discomfort and then drive the cyborg that we were talking about in a particular direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Here's one more important point. She talked about a restricted diet, and that's definitely something the elites want to move us towards, whether it's veganism or if it's this insect thing. None of this is right for us. We're designed a specific way, whether you believe in a creator or we evolved that way. No matter how you slice this one, you shouldn't be messing with the dietary stuff. Like we're omnivores and we're supposed to have like a varied diet for a reason. And the supplemental thing, I'm glad she brought that up. Everybody thinks they can supplement what they're missing from their diet when like there should be like a big slap across the face. Like the should have had a V8. You should have just had the vegetables rather than the vegetables in a pill. Yeah, no kidding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's switch gears here. I got something for you guys here. This is sort of I don't know, sort of clickbaity, but at the same time, I'm fascinated by it and slightly disturbed. Check this out. This is out of NBC News. Here we go. Oh no, it's muted. What is going on there? Why you got to do me like this?
There better
Muted.
not be a shark,
It's
Hesher.
not settled in yet.
Nope, there's no shark involved, Ruckus. You're cool. You're all good. But hey, you may want to stay off the beach after you see this one.
Tonight in South Carolina, a beach community in mourning.
I'm still in shock. I mean, it's something just like it's not settled in yet. I don't think. It's just surreal right now.
Horry County authorities telling NBC News 63-year-old resident Tammy Perot was struck and impaled by a flying beach umbrella.
With a gust of wind that came through yesterday, it took an umbrella through the air and it just kept going and going. And everybody just said, duck. And we ducked. And unfortunately, she was in the line of fire.
Tammy was rushed to a local hospital where she later died. Friends now remembering her as a kind soul.
She was the kindest person to anybody, never had a bad word to say about anybody. You know, she was the first one to say hello when you saw her.
Beach umbrellas provide that necessary shade on a hot summer day, but can be more dangerous than you might imagine. This 2019 video, also from Horry County, shows a rogue flying umbrella just missing a toddler. Senator Bob Menendez reacting to that incident, calling for new regulations.
In my view, the only things that should be flying around through the air on a sunny day at the shore should be seagulls and frisbees, not spear-tipped beach umbrellas that have the potential to claim lives.
The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission estimates there were roughly 2,800 beach umbrella-related injuries between 2010 and 2018. In another incident in Massachusetts, a 13-year-old was rushed to the hospital after sustaining severe injuries to his right shoulder from a flying umbrella.
Really large, like gash in the shoulder.
That 13-year-old surviving that traumatic injury. But tonight, a tragic reminder of just how deadly this essential beach accessory can be.
She'd do anything for you as a friend, as a sister, as a wife. She just loved life.
Friends and locals remembering Tammy Perot not just for her kindness.
All right, I'll pause it right there. That's sad, but I'm fascinated by this concept of I've never seen this happen before. But did you see that clip of the spear almost hitting that toddler? That was scary, man. That was scary. That thing was just like boom. That was headed right for him. And it killed this lady. That's absolutely crazy. Can't they come up with a better way to anchor those things into the sand? I mean, 20, and then I didn't know 2,800 injuries. That's a way bigger number than I had imagined when I first got into this clip. Pretty crazy, man.
You didn't know about the 2,800 injuries from umbrellas, but you probably knew about all the people getting monkeypox or getting heart attacks from taking a nap in the middle of the afternoon,
Yeah.
or how many people died from COVID.
Mhm. Right.
But that's really, or how many people got shot at this terrible incident that just happened in your town XYZ at at place LMNOP. But no, but the umbrellas are out there taking out 2,800 people. I think we have an epidemic.
Yeah.
I think we need to implement some sort of testing, and we need to put some sort of restriction on the asymptomatic beach umbrellas. What do you think? Should shut
Yeah.
down some businesses over this? Yeah.
We should just shut the whole society down. We should definitely stay indoors. We should definitely close the schools.
We need a vaccine. That's it. There we go.
Oh,
Problem solved.
yes. All right. Yes, we can defend ourselves at the beach with a flying umbrella spear jib jab. There you go.
Hey, Jethro says in the comments, that's like some 80s action movie Cause of Death. I'm inclined to agree. Yeah, I'm sorry that this happened to this lady. It's really sad and incredibly embarrassing. I mean, I know if that happened to me, I would be so embarrassed for anyone to know it. Like, please make something up.
Mhm.
Don't put that on my headstone. But I'm curious. I want to go and spend some time looking at the microfiche of the library and see if I can find any other reports from the 20s or 30s or 40s of this thing happening, right? Because I mean, certainly you look at old photos of beaches back then, they were using beach umbrellas there too. The same wind conditions would apply, it being a coastal area. So certainly this has happened before. But now it's a crisis. Now something must be done. We have rogue beach umbrellas killing people. Stop press, right? There has to be a federal committee assembled immediately to solve this problem. Umbrellas should be banned, right? That's the fever pitch of crisis that we're seeing over this problem. A simple redesign is all that's necessary, I think, to solve this problem. Why does it have to be a crisis of epic proportions in the way that it's reported?
Yeah. They should maybe have a website like Open Vares for beach umbrellas. I haven't looked at Open Vares in a while, so I went to Open Vares. Wow, the numbers there are staggering. Uh, I'm not gonna go into them too hard, but I'm seeing numbers over at Open Vares like 2,260,611 adverse events, 30,162 reported deaths, 172,590 reported hospitalizations. So, there are other things out there, current things. I mean, not to understate or belittle the tragedy of this poor 63-year-old woman who was struck and killed by a flying umbrella. That is quite insane. But yeah, if we're going to talk about changing policies and stuff like that, rather than just redesigning a simple utilitarian item like a beach umbrella.
And here's maybe one of the reasons they have to blow a story like this out of proportion is that's their model that they got used to across the last 2 years. So it's always about something that's a crisis. And to your points there, both of you, about the guy coming on and saying we need regulation. Yeah, this is just them trying to apply what they learned from the pandemic on everything now. And I don't think that was or wasn't supposed to be, I don't think, a one fix all solution for all of the problems. We were kidding about them putting out a vaccine, but if they could, they would. They absolutely would. Not that long ago, kids were playing with real metal spikes called lawn darts in their backyard, and probably unattended. So I'm sure, and I know, I've seen some numbers that a lot of people did get hurt with those things. But they redesigned the lawn darts and made them safer. They have them now, except they don't have sharp spikes on them. But it's the same premise, same kind of fun, except now you won't maim Timmy with it, So I like that when there's a problem that usually it's supposed to be human ingenuity that's going to solve that problem, and this is what causes new invention and enterprise and this could create a new product, this could create jobs. gosh darn, why would we want to do that? Instead, we want to let's create another arm of the government and hire a bunch of IRS agents to go out there and enforce the umbrella safety rule, I guess, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, since you bring up lawn darts, I had to type it in. Lawn darts, let's see. Effective December 19 of 1988, the CPSC banned the sale of lawn darts in the United States. And let's see if we can't find out how many injuries there were. There we go. In 1987, an estimated 6,100 people had been treated in hospital emergency rooms for injuries involving lawn darts between 1978 and through 1936. Wow. Is that correct? Can that be a thing? Did lawn darts become a thing in 1936? Okay. At any rate, they took them off the market. My point, the reason I bring it up is they took them off the market with 6,000 people having injuries. And here's this other thing that we're talking about that's got 2,260,611 injuries, adverse events. Okay, well, that is similar to an injury. That may be worse than an injury for some of the people experiencing adverse events for that thing. Oh boy. Session Jones says umbrella safety courses, registration, and extensive licensing. Yeah, no kidding. All right. Well, I guess when you're on the beach, folks, if someone yells duck, maybe hit the deck because you don't know. This could be a beach umbrella. It's like a giant lawn dart.
Or just bring your own shade.
Yeah, really.
That's what I do when you go to the beach up here.
There you go.
I would carry my umbrella concealed, but that sounds terribly uncomfortable.
All right. Are you guys following all this stuff going on at Lake Mead? Have you seen the Lake Mead shrinking in the drought or whatever? But I personally think
what Lake Mead, right?
Yeah, right. What Lake Mead? I think Nestle took all the water and put it in bottles and resold it to everybody. Well, the interesting thing about Lake Mead drying up is they're finding all the corpses down there. They're finding so many human bones, human bodies. I can't even keep track of how many stories I've seen lately like this. Here's a brand new one. This one came out God, it's so hard. The YouTube has totally changed the way that they do the descriptions. It's difficult to find stuff that I used to know where it was. But here, check this out. This is yet another Lake Mead story. This one's a little bit weird though. This isn't just we found something. It's like, wait a minute, are you guys even doing a good job when you find body parts anymore or skeletons and whatnot? Check this out. Oh, bugger.
It's the first time the public is hearing about it as the 8 News Now I-team exposes what happened. It seems a mistake may have been made after the discovery. While one government agency refuses to answer questions, another says it has no documentation.
Well, the I-team's Vanessa Murphy has been working on this all week long to find you answers. She has more now from Mojave County, Arizona.
This is where one family says they found a bone here at Lake Mead. We're at South Cove. This is where the Colorado River begins to form the lake. Now, what's unclear is what the National Park Service did with the bone.
We were standing out there.
Bruce Barker says he was here with his family in July of 2021 when his granddaughter, Kimmy, who we talked with via Zoom, made a discovery.
I reached down, picked it up, and I was like, oh, look at that. And then I went off to my grandpa and I go, Grandpa, look what I found.
Appeared to be a human femur.
He says they later called the National Park Service.
When you contacted them, what were your hopes?
Well, my hope was that it would actually be a human femur and that they could do some DNA and give somebody closure on what might have happened to maybe their loved ones.
But the 8 News Now I-team has learned that never happened. After reaching out to the National Park Service multiple times by phone, email, and even showing up at the Boulder City office, we received this email stating medical officials determined the bone was not human. So we reached out to the Mojave County Medical Examiner's office, and a manager said the office sent a photo to a forensic anthropologist who
I'll pause it right there and just ask you guys, what do you think? Is that not a human bone? Can you think of any other critter that would have a bone that looks like this?
Bigfoot.
All right. Cryptozoology excluded. What about you, Corey? What do you think? Is that a human bone?
My first thought was femur. I don't know how tall the girl is, so it's hard to get a sense of scale considering the way the photo was taken. But if the evidence is disappearing, my first thought was the Clintons must be involved at some part of the chain.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Well, let's see what the anthropologists have to say here.
said it was an animal bone, and then the bone was destroyed.
That would be a tragedy if that is what happened.
The I-Team showed these photos to 2 board-certified forensic anthropologists.
So that's the thigh bone, the upper bone of the leg?
Are you 100% sure?
Yeah. That's a femur.
So it's all very distinctively a human bone.
When we asked the medical examiner's office for documentation, the manager said there is none. She also refused to provide the name of the forensic anthropologist who she said reviewed a photo. And the head of the office said there's no correlating case in their files.
If I get a case in and it's not human, it still goes in my logbook. I still retain the emails or I retain the text messages. However, I got that. So that's a problem.
The National Park Service stated it entered the bone into evidence, but what remains unclear is whether the agency then handed it to the medical examiner's office or sent a photo. The agency repeatedly ignored our questions.
Would any trained forensic anthropologist think that's an animal bone?
I shouldn't think so.
Bruce Barker points out when his granddaughter found that bone 1 year ago, the lake was 27 feet higher. Vanessa Murphy, live, local, now.
Wow. Whoever that's pretty poor work right there. They thought they could get away with just being like, no, we showed it to an anthropologist. They said it's not human. Don't worry about it.
The way they made that bone disappear makes me wonder if it wasn't a giant, because that happens to the bones they find usually of supposed giants. Yeah, it's very hard to tell how big that is. It did seem kind of large, actually. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, in that
I don't think it
second
was
picture.
I don't think it was a giant, but
yeah,
it seemed like it was pretty big. This is very interesting. There's obviously a cover-up happening here, but why? This is very strange. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's crazy if you start looking at all the videos in the recommendeds on this. It's like as this thing gets lower and lower, they're just finding more and more stuff. They're finding like partial bodies in barrels and all kind of crazy stuff. Just amazing. We could do an entire show on all of the people parts that they're finding down there in the dried up lake.
And 100 years from now, the news is going to be covering how they're discovering all of these like unexplained hundreds of thousands of disposed face masks. Where did these come from?
Maybe they can make maybe in the future, in the far future, maybe after our civilization collapses under transhumanism and the Great Reset, and a new civilization comes about and they hit that industrial age, maybe when they start reharvesting hydrocarbons from down below, they can trick everybody into saying it's face mask fuel. Like they tell us it's fossil fuel. Maybe they can say, well, these weirdos that went extinct a million years ago, they had all these face masks or whatever these blue pieces of cloth and plastic are. We're making fuel out of them, guys, but there's a limited supply. All right, let's pick on the Child Protection Services. What do you guys think about that? That might be fun. Pick on CPS. Yeah, yeah. All right, let's do it. Let's do
It's
it.
a
I gotta.
three-letter agency. They got it coming.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Why are my tabs muted?
Here on Fox, an employee with Child Protective Services is caught on camera telling a 14-year-old girl in foster care to become a prostitute.
That's right, and this girl is one of hundreds of kids in CPS custody living in hotels all over the state. Fox 26's Randy Wallace live from Southwest Houston here with.
What is this with hotels being commandeered for this, that, and the other? Like, I just don't understand this new paradigm of like, oh, we're gonna force you to house all these homeless people. We're gonna put all the captured children that the CPS has in hotels. But why is everything spilling over into hotels? I didn't even let us get into the story, and I had to stop that one and ask that question.
That's actually a good point. And this is something that, as far as I'm aware, the earliest instance of this I've heard of was actually here in 2017 in Portland, because I was with someone at the time who was a school teacher, and she told me that in her special education room, they had a certain number of hotel rooms at a specific hotel that were allocated specifically for families of students that were in her special education. So if they had a special education plan and they were in danger of being homeless, they would just be given a hotel room. And there was about 5 or 6 of these that were maintained by the school system. So it's not entirely unprecedented, but certainly on the scale that it's happening now, no one could have predicted.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's get back to it here. See what we can discover.
This story, Randy, the exclusive.
Yeah, Jonathan. Now, earlier this year, a federal judge scorned Child Protective Services for making kids available for prostitution in the CPS system. Now we have a case where an employee with that state agency is actually encouraging prostitution of a 14-year-old child.
You're gonna be a real hoe. Wouldn't they remove a child from a parent that told their child to be a prostitute?
They should. And they would.
Keisha Basley has 9 kids. She turned to Child Protective Services to help her with her 14-year-old daughter, who she says was running away and causing trouble at school.
My daughter told me that the worker had been telling her that she should do these things. So she said she decided to video her.
CPS is housing the girl at a hotel. She's one of dozens in Harris County. In the video, she tells the CPS employee she wants food. The CPS worker tells her to be a prostitute.
I mean, she was basically encouraging a 14-year-old girl to become a prostitute.
And giving her an incentive to do so, and almost a threat of not having her needs being met if she didn't do what this woman very explicitly told her to do.
If the parent, was to do something like this to my child, I would be bashed. I would be called a horrible parent. I would lose my kids.
Get your tail to that room. Basley filed a formal complaint with CPS.
This should not happen to girls in their care. This should not happen. This is unacceptable.
Jamie Masters, the commissioner of CPS, came to Houston to personally apologize to Basley and her daughter.
I've never seen that happen before, where a commissioner of CPS comes in from Austin just to apologize about something that's horrible that's been done to a child and a parent involved with CPS.
I do not believe that that was genuine. I really don't.
It's bad enough if it's one rogue caseworker. It concerns me that it may be bigger than that. And they need to investigate this and make sure that it's not just one person. And they've got to figure out a way to protect these kids.
CPS sent us the following prepared statement. DFPS is aware of the video and has taken action. The person in the video, who was employed as CPS support staff, was dismissed from her position August 10th. The safety and appropriateness with which children in care must be treated is our paramount concern. Nothing less will be tolerated.
All right. Well, as disturbing as it is to say this, that's actually pretty tame compared to some of the stories that I've heard come out of CPS situations. But nonetheless, man, that lady had 9 kids and gave one up, like forced one to go into CPS custody because she was having a problem with that teenager. So you can see how CPS is not always the solution. If anything, it could make things much, much worse. I was pretty disturbed when I saw that. I don't know what to say about it. It's pretty black pill. It's pretty gross. It's pretty but these are the kind of things that are brewing underneath all of this crisis stuff that we're faced with every day. It's like, oh, you got to deal with this crisis and that crisis and this crisis, and oh, our financials are wrecked, and our medical system is wrecked, and our economy is wrecked, and we're gonna do a great reset. All this stuff like that is just getting worse underneath the hood behind the scenes while we're all focused on all this macro level stuff. There's this micro level stuff like that going on in spades that is very, very disturbing.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And whenever I see something like this, and if these stories typically are told a certain way, and more often than not, they involve a particular demographic. And by that I mean single mothers. And so I say to myself, okay, where are the men? Where are the fathers? Where are the guys in all this? You know, that are this whole situation. And it's not, and I'm not sitting here saying, well, deadbeats necessarily either. We're talking about people who are making choices. We are talking largely about people who are choosing to have children in those situations. 9 children, and you're in a situation where you can barely provide for them because the incentive that has been given to you is government protection, government agencies, social services. There's a massive safety net that will save you from the mistake that you keep making again and again and again and again. And here you are complaining about those same agencies. Do you not see a connection here? At what point do you take some accountability for the choices that you made rather than appealing to the state and all of the state agencies to protect you from your own poor choices? You know, and that's the conversation that should be happening here, as well as the conversation about how horrific this is. This is an incredibly horrific situation. I'm sure it's happening all over the place all the time. But the conversation is, why are we tolerating this? Why is this a normal? Why is this something that we say, yeah, it's going on in the country. Who cares? There's a state agency that exists to deal with these kinds of people and these kinds of situations, right? The whole situation itself has become disgustingly normalized.
Yeah, it really has. And it's that falls into one of those categories that we were talking about today on my TNT show, right? Like that is which category is that? I know it's one that we mentioned today. The learned helplessness, perhaps. Does it fall into that, or is this a little bit outside of learned helplessness? Because this is sort of like, I'm assuming you're right, and that is a single mother right there. She didn't look destitute or poor. She had her hair did. She had nice clothes. She had pretty makeup. You know what I mean? And I'm not judging. I don't want to make assumptions, but if that is a single mother, and if she doesn't have gainful employment, you got to wonder like how much social service money you get for having 9 kids. Again, I'm not projecting on her. I don't know what her situation is. All I know is that that was the mother who handed her child over to CPS, you know? I mean, geez, in my experience and from what I know about it, it's like CPS takes kids away from people in most situations. I'm not used to this idea of someone handing their child over to CPS and then saying, "Oh, they mishandled my child," or "They told my child she needed to be a prostitute if she wanted to eat." I mean, what a mess. What an absolute societal mess that is, regardless of, whether I'm right or wrong about my game theory here with that person.
Which is why it's obviously fake news, Hesher. This is a propaganda smear campaign funded by the Russians and Trump to help further divide the country by trying to convince us that our state and federal agencies, our government, these three little agencies, they're trying to trick us into thinking that even though, yes, there are people who work there and they're all unique individuals and some of them may or may not be flawed because they're human beings, that's impossible. As soon as you join the government, whether state or federal, you are a government employee, you represent the government, you represent the ultimate good that can do no harm, no wrong in the land. So this is fake. No one in CPS would ever do such a thing. And this is garbage. And I blame Trump. And that's why we have to elect AOC in 2024.
All right, solutions right here in the boiler room. Solutions. You may have just saved our reputation with YouTube itself right there, Ruckus. They're going to love us now. They're going to forgive us for all the terrible thought crimes that we've committed over the years here on YouTube. No, what a mess. What an absolute mess.
Well, we've said it before, but you know what they say about solutions, right? What is it? Yesterday's solutions are today's problems. And so, case in point, with this story itself, there it is right there. This is a mindset that and again, I'm assuming, I don't know anything about this woman. I don't know anything about her personal life, but there are enough people in a situation where they've made certain decisions because certain incentives were put in place that were only put in place because yesterday it was a solution to a perceived problem. And now that solution is presenting the very same problem magnified today because that incentive exists.
Right. Yeah, man. We see that over and over again all the time. All the time. Okay, let's see here. Alec Baldwin's back in the news again for the whole shooting at the Rust set. And oddly enough, disgraced Cuomo, came back out of the woodworks here. Chris Cuomo, fired from CNN. By the way, Brian Stelter fired from his show canceled today. Gotta love that. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. But check this out. So here's okay. I don't even know if I want to play the clip on this. It's probably just we can just kind of gloss over it. But the things I saw that have come out are number one, I believe it was the FBI. I don't know why the FBI needs to be involved in this case in the first place. I'm curious about that. I know I'll never get an answer to that. I'm gonna have to fill in the blanks ourselves on that. But they're saying, oh, how long has it been? I don't even remember when we first covered this when it happened, Corey. It was like a long time ago. It was months ago now. And within, I don't know, 12, 24 hours of the event, all the gun channels on YouTube, well, not all of them, but a number of gun channels on YouTube had gone in. Some people had the exact same revolver. They showed its battery of arms. They showed how to operate it. They showed how it works. They showed how it is basically impossible for that gun to go off in any situation without someone pulling the trigger, even if they were, fanning the hammer and all this other garbage. And now, okay, so then he goes on Cuomo's podcast. When did Chris Cuomo get a podcast? We don't need you podcasting, Chris Cuomo. Get the fuck out of here. I'll just lay that one out for you. You disgraced piece of garbage from CNN. But anyways, so one disgraced piece of garbage interviews another disgraced piece of garbage, Alec Baldwin, who, by the way, is a gun control person. Ironically, guess gun control has nothing to do with gun safety. But anyways, now they're saying that well, he went on there and said he totally changed his story. You know what? Let me just play this clip. Let me play the clip. It'll say it better now. I'm getting tired here So I'm not going to be good at paraphrasing. I'll just let the clip speak for itself, because they'll tell you in this clip what part of his story changed. Part of his story has changed from the beginning to this moment here on Cuomo's podcast. I don't know. That just feels wrong coming out of the mouth. Cuomo's podcast. Get out of here.
Before that gun went off. So joining us now to take a deeper dive into Baldwin's interview with Chris Cuomo and what potential legal troubles he may face, we're joined by legal analyst Emily Baker. Emily, thanks so much for being here again.
Cool hair, Emily.
Thanks so much, Nicole. Good to see you again. All right, so yesterday I asked you, what you expected to hear. You said you were surprised that he was actually speaking out at all, because this is an ongoing investigation. So did Baldwin say anything in that interview you think may have impacted the case either positively or negatively?
What's interesting is that he has a now different description on how he was operating the hammer of the gun. In his previous ABC interview, he's showing his thumb pulling back the hammer and talking about showing it to Helena Hutchins. And is it far enough back now? What about now? What about now? And in this new interview, he's talking about slapping it on the top and fanning it. It's a completely different description of how he was manipulating the gun. And I do think that could create problems for him, at least as it goes to people looking at whether his story is consistent.
Okay, so you're saying, Emily, it's a completely different description. Yesterday also asked, if Baldwin could potentially face charges. You said someone could potentially face charges here. Is there any more clarity about who that someone may or may not be after his comments in this new interview?
Baldwin definitely seemed to allude to others on set, including A.D. Halls and Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer. And, I'm a former prosecutor, so when I'm looking at this, I am careful to know that these are prosecutorial decisions that will be made in New Mexico. However, you've got the prop individual, Seth Kinney, who provided the rounds to the set that day based on Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's loss.
I'm going to pause that right there, because so there was that one that came out, and then I saw this one come across my news app just tonight, and I think this is what we've been wondering all along, you guys. Is anything going to come of this? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that because of what we're seeing here, what we just saw right there, compared with what we saw originally, compared with what I'm about to read you right here, this is going to go nowhere. The legal team for Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer on the Rust movie set, is not happy with the Santa Fe, New Mexico Sheriff's Department and its handling of the investigation. Quote, the primary question in this case from the beginning has been, where did the live rounds that ended up on the Rust set come from? That's what you asked in the very beginning, Corey. You laid out, folks, you can go back and listen to that. Corey laid out all of the protocols that are put in place, all the safeties that are put in place on movie sets so that things like this don't happen. There's a reason why this hasn't happened since 93, when Lee was killed on set, right?
Brandon Lee. Yep, Brandon Lee in Delaware on filming The Crow, 1993. Yeah.
Right. So the primary question in this case from the beginning has been, where did the live rounds that ended up on the Rust set come from? Gutierrez-Reed lawyer Jason Bowles said in a statement, as can be seen from the attached emails, the sheriff's office made a conscious decision not to pursue this question at all by refusing to ask the FBI to test any of the rounds for fingerprints or DNA. We now know for certain there were live rounds on set. It is inconceivable that the sheriff would not seek answers to this fundamental question, and it raises a serious problem with the entire investigation. We have long sought this answer and will not give up in pursuing the truth to find it. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was the armorer on the set on Rust in October 2021. We all know that. The statement, blah, blah, blah. Given the facts, the items were from movie sets, which had been handled over and over and over. It didn't make sense, a detective said in response to an email from the attorney there asking why the FBI didn't do any DNA testing on the rounds. So, I don't know. I'm predicting that at this point, this is not nobody's going to get in trouble for this because they don't know who brought the bullet onto the set. They're not going to find out. No one's going to admit it, right? I mean, so this is going to be just what, an accidental death? Maybe there'll be a civil case. I suppose it could go to a civil case, but this is, and we predicted this from the get-go too. Baldwin is going to walk away from this like the Teflon King.
Yeah, I think he walks, and I think that the other individuals on the set that day who were part of the chain of incidents and the protocol that should have played out around the safety of that weapon, I think they walk too, and the entire thing just gets filed as a bungled investigation. Now, it's interesting that they're not asking this particular question because, again, and for those who don't know, because I know that we have a lot of new listeners, I'm a IATSE cinematographer. I've worked in the industry for 24 years in the camera department on film sets, and I've worked on films and television shows where we have used firearms for scenes, and there is a particular protocol that plays out when you're dealing with a weapon on a set. What most people don't know is that we're not using, when we say prop gun, we're not using replica firearms. We're using actual functional firearms on set. They're referred to as prop guns because it's the gun that's going to be used in the shot. And the ammunition, we typically what we do is we drain live ammunition to make sure that there is no gunpowder in the cartridges. And then for weapons that are going to be shown in close-ups, specifically revolvers, where you're supposed to be able to see the round in the inside of the revolver, we actually will drain that round to make sure that it cannot fire. There's no powder, so it can't discharge, but we want it to look real. It has to print on camera. So we do reassemble the bullet and cartridge. Say when it's on camera, it looks real and the audience buys it. They have to believe that they're looking at a loaded gun. For shots where we're actually discharging the firearm, then what we do is we, instead of draining the cartridge, we simply remove the bullet, we crimp the end of the bullet casing, and we usually stuff paper wadding in there. That way, when it fires, we're actually getting the recoil and the smoke and the color of the discharge to look right, and it feels right for the camera, but there's no projectile that's leaving the weapon. So there's an entire protocol on sets where the set armorer is supposed to go around with a flashlight and show the weapon has been cleaned and there's no debris in the barrel, and there are no cartridges in the weapon whatsoever. Every person who's in proximity of the camera has to inspect that weapon and verbally verify that they have checked it and that the chamber is clear and that the weapon is safe to be used by the talent in the scene. And the only person who should be handling the weapon is the set armorer, and the only person who should be handing the weapon to the talent, in this case Baldwin, is the set armorer. Now, what occurred on Russ that day is that the Hannah Gutierrez Reed individual was not a trained set armorer. She got a crash course in handling firearms from her dad, so she was not qualified to be doing that job. She didn't appear to understand the function of draining rounds. She didn't appear to understand the protocols in place around what is supposed to happen before the weapon is brought to talent and used in the shot. And also, too, the person who handed Baldwin the weapon wasn't her, the armorer. It was the first assistant director, who shouldn't have been anywhere near the set armory and should have never touched that weapon in the first place. So there were a number of different breaches of protocol that occurred that led to the incident in question. And I knew Helena, who was killed. I'd worked with her on a number of different projects over the years. So the fact that there would be this banter between the two of them going on before rolling a take like that, I think that's also a bit odd. Because I know from working as a DP, you're blocking the shot before you roll a take, and that means that the actor is walking through the beats of action that are going to occur on that scene. It's very serious business. And certainly when a firearm is involved, you're not fucking around on the set. So there were a lot of different things that happened to the culture of the set, the culture of the workplace, and the protocols that were ignored that just created a messy situation overall. But I still think that there are some people who should be charged. And for the fact that they seem to be shifting the focus of the problem and the mishandling onto law enforcement, and not looking at the obvious people who should have been responsible for making sure that protocols were observed, that tells me people are going to walk on this situation, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the summary there, man. We do have a lot of new listeners who probably appreciate that perspective there. I have kind of a random off question for you. Is it possible that all of these pandemic procedures that are now newly part of, because you're talking about a very like set in stone set of protocols and procedures that are for safety, and those were necessary and they're effective when they're followed, and they have been followed flawlessly pretty much since 1993 when Brandon Lee was killed. Is it possible that when a whole new set of protocols that, and with regards to firearms, it's a very mechanical process, you know what I mean? Like what you just laid out there, it's like, okay, these steps are in place to stop a mechanical accident, a negligent accident, you know, one that has immediate consequences, one that is visible. All right. But now we have these COVID safety officers and all this COVID staff in there. It's like they're trying to do something similar with the idea of germs and getting sick. So I'm just curious, like, do you think lobbing in all of these other protocols into Hollywood sets has disrupted the well-functioning legacy protocols that are super important? I'm not trying to say that caused this in any way, shape, or form. So everybody don't misunderstand me. But I'm just curious in a general sense, if the inclusion of all these new job titles and all of their protocols and rules could maybe be disrupting some of the safety features or just even the general, role of what it is to do film.
That's an excellent point, and I'm glad that you brought it up because I can answer absolutely yes. The way that these COVID protocols have just been thrown into the very chaotic, fast-paced, but still somehow regimented environment of filmmaking, I mean, it cannot be underestimated at all. I mean, there's certain basic functions that, for instance, someone working with me in a camera department, if I'm the director of photography and I'm operating the camera, it takes typically on a big set, it takes 5 people to operate one camera, especially depending upon if that camera is on a crane or if you're doing complicated dolly shots, or if it's steady cam work and other things. There's a lot of coordination that has to go into how that camera is operated on set. And one of the most basic functions is that of the focus puller. So typically on a set, if you're working with a big motion picture camera, let's say for the sake of an example, an Alexa XT, which you see all the time, big cameras, big lenses, often on the front, matte boxes, the whole thing. The operator will be on the left side of the camera, and on the right side of the camera is the focus puller. So that person's job is to keep the shot in focus as the camera moves, to keep the talent in focus. And they have a follow focus, which is that white wheel that you sometimes see next to the lens, and they're pulling that back and forth as the camera moves. So if I'm on, let's say, a Fisher dolly or a Chapman dolly or something like that, I'm going to be sat on the left side. My AC pulling focus is going to be sat on the right side. We're very close together. We're inside of that 6-foot window, breathing across each other while we're trying to get that shot. So with the COVID protocols in place, what had to happen was all of the assistant cameras, they had to be backed off. So they have to use a Preston or a Bartek or a Tilta nucleus. There are other follow focus systems that operate wirelessly. So they're able to step back, look at a monitor, and still remotely pull focus while the camera is moving. Well, that adds a lot of cost. And there are people who have to train for that, because that's not, it's a skill that you have to build. It's very difficult to keep a shot in focus when you're far away from the camera. And there's some people who are gifted enough to be able to do it naturally, but a lot of people can't. So that changed the way that we worked. The way that we deal with moving certain things around on a set, that has changed the way that we worked. How many people can be in proximity to the shooting area where the talent is focusing on the camera? All of that stuff has created distance. It's slowed things down, and it's created situations where the standard protocols don't necessarily work anymore. So I think, yeah, it's definitely possible that that could have played a role in what happened on Rust, especially given the fact that a lot of the time people were just trying to feel out these protocols and implement them, and they're having to break 20, 30 years of habit, because when you're on set, and you're used to how things go, and you're used to being able to anticipate what is going to be needed in a given situation, it's very difficult to unlearn that conditioning to install new conditioning. So I think you're bringing up a very valid point that I certainly haven't heard anyone else discuss anywhere.
Yeah, well, I can't help it, man. I'm always thinking about the whole response to this and what we've been through in the last 2 years. And it's like, I could totally see that, I could totally see that disrupting. It's the ultimate disruption. It's disrupted so many things. But then you've got like all these jobs been created over it, all these titles and everything and protocols. And it's just like, they don't necessarily mesh. They're mutually excluding other things, like everything, like everything.
I know that on kind of during the middle of the lockdowns, when some of the larger productions were still going on in LA, there was talk of buying essentially derelict shopping malls and converting them to stages, and then having habitats there where people who were working on a show would test in, and then they would live in a closed environment for 3, 4, 5 months, however long the production was in principal photography, and they couldn't leave. So they would have all their services there. The set would be there. The sound stages, they were going to work at the same location every single day, because these were science fiction shows, so they could comp in any environment. I know The Mandalorian was talking about doing this. I don't know if they implemented it, but creating a closed environment for each project that seemed to be kind of touted as what was going to become the new norm. I don't think that will necessarily be the case going forward. Although I know that a lot of the sets, especially the union sets operating up here, all of the COVID protocols are still in place, and you still see everyone in the camera department wearing masks, people's faces fogging up. I don't know how anyone can keep focus in that kind of situation. So it doesn't seem like those protocols are going anywhere anytime soon. And yeah, it's because they created these COVID compliance officers. They created these people who now need to have a reason to exist. And once that gets unionized, it's very, very difficult to remove it from its entrenchment in the larger system. Sure.
Oh man, that sounds awful. I don't know how anyone can put up with that. I really don't. It just sounds like it's wrecking every industry it's touching, pretty much.
It is. I didn't even work on those sets. And I will do smaller non-union commercial work, and I do documentary work, and then other things now. I won't go near the environment. I don't want to be a part of that protocol. I don't want to be, in a situation where they're forcing me to take a PCR test just to go to work, wear a mask all day. No, forget it. It's not worth it.
Yep. No way. All right. Well, you know what? You guys have got this. Wow, we went almost 2 hours here. I'm gonna have to call an executive shutdown here because my alarm goes off in like 5 hours and 45 minutes, and I get to do another 3 hours of podcasting. So just for my own sanity and well-being, I'm gonna have to shut this show down. I feel like we could go all night, but I gotta close it. Ruckus, over to you, man. You got anything you want to throw in there before we'll go around the room here? You got anything you want to throw out there before we shut this one down?
How come two of the stories we were talking about, people are asking them to test something like the bone? They're like, hey, you should do some DNA testing on that and see who it is. We got some bullets, and they're like, hey, you should do some DNA testing on that and see who may have been responsible. And they completely failed to do so. Maybe what they're trying to hide is that there's no such thing as them being able to perform these fancy DNA tests that we see on TV and movies.
Yeah, you're right.
And that might be bad for some other DNA-related technology news stories that we're seeing right now. Just saying.
Right.
But I don't know. This story about the rust thing, even though this happened in my backyard, relatively speaking, because that was here in New Mexico. This is definitely Wandering Wolf's wheelhouse, so I'm just sitting back and listening and respecting what he has to say. But my spidey sense, similar to the bone story, is somebody's covering something up. And I don't think that necessarily... I mean, a crime was committed here, and somebody's life was ended. And if this was like intentional or something like that, then that means that your friend there, Helene, the victim, was a targeted victim, number one, or maybe an unintended victim, and that there was a crime that somebody was trying to commit and it failed. And we might there's a lot of follow up to this. This is a very interesting story, but yep, not my specialty, unfortunately. So I'm grateful for people like Corey Drayton when we can have an expert in the subject matter available on hand. So, and guys, I'm exhausted, so I second Hesher's executive decision.
All right.
I want to go to bed.
Yeah, man, we got to do it. Let's get out of here, go to bed. But I agree with you, Ruckus. Something is rotten in that story. Something's rotten in both of those stories, and there's just too many avenues to obfuscate, too many avenues for these things to get buried. I don't know. It gives me a creepy feeling. And when I look across the media this week, there's a missing teenager in Northern California in the Truckee area, been missing for a while. And now they're saying 2 more people have gone missing in the same area at the same time. There's just all this really weird stuff going on. And it feels like, I guess the theme I'm kind of grabbing here tonight is like we're missing a lot of the ground level stuff because we're at the macro level of, oh my God, the sky's falling. Oh my God, COVID. Oh my God, Fourth Industrial Revolution, World Economic Forum, all these Bond villains and purported heroes and power politics. And it's become very easy to kind of let the on the ground things sort of slip between the cracks, and for corruption to flourish, and for negligence to be swept under the carpet, if you will, and maybe even crimes to go unlooked at. And they're just doing it right in our faces, even on the crime. I have more clips that I'm not even going to play tonight, but I have more clips that I'm finding where it's like they're telling us about a crime that happened and they're showing us the person that did it, but the person's not in jail. The person's not arrested, or they've been arrested 6, 7, 8 times and they're still walking around. It's really weird. It's stark to see that. It used to be like when you would see the story of someone who did, retail theft 6, 7 times and stole hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff. They'd be wearing an orange jumper. Now they just show their picture and say, this is them. They're part of a retail crime ring. What a bummer. The times they're changing here.
Unless they showed up for a protest on January 6th.
Oh, right. Because that's worse than Pearl Harbor. That's worse than 9/11. Yeah. As Joseph Arthur likes to say, I'm picking up what you're putting down right there, man. All right, everybody, that's it. What about you, Corey Drayton? Over to you for any saved rounds, final thoughts. Ooh, I shouldn't say saved rounds after the Rust story.
Yeah, man. Another great show. I'm with you. I will third the decision to shut it down. Although I could probably go all night too with the myriad of things that are swirling around in my head. For anyone who's interested in the breakdown that we actually did on the Rust shooting, because I did a play-by-play of both what was reported on Rust and what happened to Brandon Lee on the Crow in 1993, and why that shooting occurred and why the protocol was put in place. You want to look to the show that was on 11/11/21. That was kind of our initial deep dive into the story on Rust. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if our prediction bears fruit. But I really appreciate Ruckus's perspective on this one too, kind of seeing in the places where most do not, when it comes to how these things are reported and how much the testing is the fulcrum around the story. So that's definitely something that I know that I will be paying a lot of attention to going forward. So apart from that, guys, it's been a fun one. Thanks so much for having me back, and I'll see you on the next show. Good night.
All right. Thanks, guys. That is Ruckus of the Daily Ruckus and Corey Drayton, the Wandering Wolf. You can catch us over on TNTRadio.live quite often, too. I was there with Corey this morning. I was there with Odd Man Out this morning. Ruckus just got back from there, and I'm heading back there in the morning. I'll be there in a few hours, and we'll do some more live radio over there. So do join us over there. Make sure you follow us on the podcast format over there. We've had some amazing interviews. Corey Drayton and I are working on sort of a ongoing exploration of how to deal with this kind of media, the kind of stuff we're doing here tonight. Trying to keep it practical and concise, though, over there on my other show, the Brian McLean Show on TNT Radio. So do check us out. Make sure you're getting that one in the podcast format. Make sure you're getting that Joseph Arthur's Technicolor Dreamcast podcast format, and also the Patrick Henningsen Show over there. Germ Warfare, a lot of good shows over there. So yeah, that's it. We're out of here, everybody. Thanks, guys. I'm gonna throw you back into the green room. Boom, there you go. All right, we're out of here. That's it for this episode of the Boiler Room. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again real soon. Oh boy, let's make sure I had the right one. I want to make sure I do that right. We'll see you again real soon.
That's it. Go ahead and run. Run home and cry to mama.